Hello everyone and welcome to another Final Fantasy XIV Asmon reactions video. This is part 4. I've been doing this as a series because it's just so massive, so much to talk about with the downfall of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, this is by request. Y'all asked for me to do this, and so I'm here to serve, and hopefully you guys get some enjoyment out of the content here today. But also, I'm not a big reacts kind of guy. So if you're hitting that subscribe button just for the reacts, just note that it has to be by request. And honestly, I think it has to be at, reacting to a reactor, just because reaction content is something that I'm very concerned by as a YouTube content creator. And I've proposed different things to YouTube for the fixes, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Now, we've covered a lot. There is a lot of content prior to this video, but I do thank you guys if you've stuck with this entire series. Now, the only thing I'm asking, guys, outside of the likes and the subscribes, is the top link in the description is for the Instagram follows. I've been challenged to grow to over 1,000. We're almost to 200 at the time of this recording. So if you guys use Instagram and you wouldn't mind supporting my comedy career over there, that would be absolutely massive and a huge help to me. Overall, Instagram is apparently a comics, networking site. That's where we do a lot of comic business, that and Facebook. So it's just wild. Anyway, let's get back into, in this case, part 4. Who is this game for anymore? And all the links and stuff for that are in the description if you guys want to go check out the original videos.
Who is this game made for?
Who?
Every simplification, every deletion of a system, every dumbing down of an interesting mechanic has always been seen as making the game more approachable. My question is, with this never-ending crusade of making the game easier and easier without ever expanding the available content or adding on to the existing gameplay formula, what is the end goal for Final Fantasy XIV? Everything I loved about the game has either been removed or dumbed down to the point of being menial. As someone who got into...
So he's already admitted that he's a story skipper, right? So I think the thing that they make this for as a Final Fantasy game, it's a numbered Final Fantasy game, and that, like, if they made a Final Fantasy Online, they disconnected the number from that, I could understand his point way more. But when you, like, when I think about Final Fantasy, even the MMO, like, I wonder what they'll do with Vana'diel. Like, I would personally love to see them remake 11, but I know that it's more, I don't know who, like, but if they ended up coming out with a single player, hell, I think I think every Final Fantasy game, especially number 1, should have a 2D sprite remix like they did with Dragon Quest 11. Let's just make that happen, right? Like, you want to play through Final Fantasy 11, as like, that solves also 16's problem where people don't want that action game. Make a a sprite based 2.5D HD version. Why not? I'd buy it. I'd love to know what you guys think about that. Anyway, I think the big part of it is that clearly, since he is a story skipper, he's not playing this game for the story in and of itself. Therefore, like, who is this game for? I don't think him.
To the game for the unique class design and amazing raid encounters, I've had to sit and watch as all the interest in class design was slowly whittled away, making every class dull and homogenized. I've had to sit and watch as all the creativity in raid design slowly evaporated into a mishmash of reusing the exact same mechanics for years on end. And if the trend continues, at some point, your favorite features will end up being dumbed down or deleted. So what is the end goal here? Who is the game made for? Cat moms who play 1 hour a month and spend...
Oh, I get this now.
Well, yeah, kind of.
I saw this on Twitter.
I mean, that's probably it. Yep, there we go. And I think, again, Final Fantasy is not a game that's built around hardcore players. And I think that the reason why Final Fantasy got so popular in 2021 and why it had been growing in popularity ever since Stormblood and you could say even Heavensward is because Final Fantasy... So let's say we're going to do another... We have 3 Microsoft Paint cards just for one video.
Paint's back, baby!
So this is the skill level of all players, right? These are the most skilled over here, and this is the least skilled. Final Fantasy does a very good job at attracting mid-core players. Like, yes, obviously you have people like the Ultimates are there and they exist.
I would argue that the mid-core is the weakest part of Final Fantasy XIV. That it feels that there isn't any, like, real meat on that bone, right? Like because you're not in the extremes and the ultimates, and there isn't anything that's going to scale to you. And it's either, and this is where like the solution in my mind is like with the trust system, for example, mix and match. Let me bring in a friend. Like if I just wanted to get on, a buddy's on, we can play as a 2-player, but we're going to bring in, the trusts. Like, let us mix and match that open world content that, let us bring trust in the open world. And thus, if you could take trusts with you into the open world, thus guaranteeing that everybody's got a 4-man party at all times, you could balance all the mobs in the open world. So then you as a player, if you want to challenge yourself, if you want to do like a no trust run in the open world, and as a black mage, then all of a sudden the black mage in and of itself doesn't have to survive like a tank does in the open world. Like there are solutions, there is a path forward, but I think the cost of that, or there's not enough demand for that. One of the two, probably both, is what's holding it back. But yeah, man, to say that it's, maybe I'm wrong. Like I'm not gonna say like that I'm the be all end all when it comes to the opinions here, but I constantly lean into that. It's casual, which is that RP and all that stuff, like that, if that fits the niche, the hardcore with the ultimate raids, etc. But I always kind of felt the mid-core was very like, I don't know, just not as attractive as I find it in other games.
But World of Warcraft is very much centered around extremely hardcore players. It's very much centered around people that raid Mythic Plus, or do Mythic Plus and raid Mythic, and they do like arena at a high level and they get good gear for it. Whereas like Final Fantasy XIV is very much, the reason why it's successful is that it appeals to that general audience. It appeals to that general audience who find the enjoyment in the simplicity of a nightclub in a video game to be refreshing and relaxing and nice, rather than people that are trying to, play the game 1 hour a day versus play the game, 12 hours a day. It is absolutely meant for those mid-core players. And those are the ones, I think, that really left WoW and went to Final Fantasy permanently.
Maybe that's what happened.
It's the mid-core players that feel like WoW just doesn't really give them any sense of satisfaction. And I think that Classic WoW was an incredible game for mid-core players, because while it required a tremendous amount of dedication, it required actually very minimal level of skill. So you could be kind of shitty at the game, but as long as you played it a lot and you knew what you were doing, you could still keep up. And that's why Classic WoW was so good. It was good because it didn't reward people for being, CSGO, level of reaction time. It didn't reward people for, just showing up once a week and then just, turning in a daily quest and getting a level a week. You had to actually earn it. And that's it. DPS is also easy to play. Yes, it is easy to play. So I think Final Fantasy is absolutely designed for that mid-core audience. This is a bell curve? It is. And this is why this is the problem, right? Is that the bell curve is like this. Most players are in here. They want to play the game regularly. They want to take it more seriously, but they don't want to do Mythic raids. They don't want to do Mythic plus 20s. They just want to do something that's kind of challenging with their friends. But with your logic, shouldn't Final Fantasy have more players than WoW? I don't know if it does or not.
We have no idea. When it comes down to it, a lot of people think concurrency has any kind of value. They think, like, who knows? Like, in terms of total, you'll never, like, that's, I don't know if that's ever going to be, catchable. I mean, WoW, I think, God, man, it's insane. At some point, they had over 20 million subscribers at one point. Final Fantasy 14 could be bigger than WoW right now, but that's just gonna ebb and flow. I have no idea. Nobody does, really. And I think that's why they don't report the stuff, because people use it to try and sell a narrative. And we see that with any stats that people can get a hold of. That's why they're trying to beat up New World on the like, oh, it's got enough players. It's doing fine. It attracts players. It keeps inviting players. It's making money. It's very profitable. Yeah. What's the end goal? Like, can it be more profitable? Certainly. But I think we're going to see that with them coming to consoles and controller support, which I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date on as well, because that's something that's really important to me.
Like, I have no clue. I think it probably doesn't. Yeah, I think that WoW is a lot bigger than Final Fantasy. I think there's a lot of reasons, by the way, why WoW still has more players. This is only one metric. There are a lot of other metrics and reasons. It's just a factor.
That entire time crying because the pixels on the screen said a sad word.
Yeah, see, so somebody who does not connect in with the story doesn't connect with the characters. Like, if you go and watch my Endwalker playthrough, like, it was so emotional. There was so much both in the real world and in the game, in the story and the characters, that it was like, absolutely. Now, I'm not a cat mom. I got 6 kids, and I would encourage people, you know, like, not to sit here and put kids off, right? Like, it's very important. I think having families is important. That's one of the problems I see within content creators. The problem that Asmongold's going to have, that many others are going to have, that they are not having families. There's going to be a check that comes due at some point, and it's going to suck for those people. But that's their choice, right? Everybody, I'm not going to bemoan them that. But if you're ever like, oh, should I have kids? Like, well, like if you're married, like, yeah, I think you probably should. Like, if you're thinking, if you have enough of an inkling to ask that question, I think you got to start to think about what's life going to be like in 30 and 40 years. And then when you have one, have a couple, just so that they have somebody that, they can share in how crazy mom and dad were, right?
Leveling roulette mains who spend the entire expansion leveling classes that they will have no use for at max level. Roleplay mains who don't even do any content at all and spend their sub money dancing at player-made clubs. Look, I'm not trying.
Yeah,
who cares?
Because the truth is that these guys are having more fun playing the game than you are. Unironically, the best server to play on is Moonguard. Moonguard feels more like World of Warcraft than any other server, straight up. So yeah, they're having more fun playing the game. You're wrong about this? Well, here's another reason why I'm right. Is because with the nightclubs and these type of social environments, they are much more resistant to content droughts.
Yep.
So, for example, if the new raid takes longer to come out, it doesn't really matter because people are already caught up doing their own events and their own content that's external of the game's release structure.
Clubs? Look, I'm not trying to shit on those kinds of people. But if that's who the game is targeting, then why even bother making high-end raids? Why even bother adding new classes to the game?
Well, why even bother doing anything if there are some people that aren't going to do it? It's like
to add on to that though, it's that the like that's where when I see people like say the hardcore and the casual are versus each other, they're symbiotic, right? Like you make hardcore content and then it advertises the game, and then what that does is somebody who might be into that, or maybe they don't know they are, just seeing that ends up becoming that goal, right? And that's where the one thing we don't see is the casuals having a direct impact on the rating scene. And that's where, it comes back down to no real player-driven economy. Like the resources are always locked and higher, so there's no real demand for like copper, right? But if that demand always existed, you could go out and enjoy and provide copper, and that is helping somebody beat the raid. Like that simple equation. It could be 1 million copper is needed as opposed to, then less than 100,000 silver, like whatever that conversion rate is. You have that constant demand. We don't have that in 14, and thus the casual player, the hardcore player doesn't feel the benefit of the casual players out there kind of doing a lot of that monotonous grinding for them, and so you don't have a true symbiotic relationship off of that, those environments. But there's not enough hardcore players to support the game financially, so you need that casual players. You need both, right? And I think that's one of the points that Lynx is missing in this case.
It's like going to a restaurant and saying, why even bother having anything else on the menu except for what I like to eat? Well, it's because there are some people that like that. That's why they have ultimates. Now, our ultimates, like, for example, ultimate raids are basically like hard mode Belshazzar is really fucking hard, right? Like, it's insanely hard. Thamine is fucking ridiculous. It's insanely difficult. And guess what? Lost Ark is built around that. Lost Ark, the primary focus in Lost Ark is challenging group PvE content. That is what most people do in that game. It is not that much of a social game. It is not that much of a sandbox game. It is a raid simulator. That's what it does. And that's great because that's what the game's made for. But there are new islands that come out that are casual islands. There's it's Mokoko Island, and you get the Mokoko hammer, and you kill the rabbit with the hammer, and it's a golden rabbit. It explodes. You get 10 gold. Oh my God, right?
I don't care.
And like these are all
like,
nice.
Let's go.
So there are things that are added, like, for example, like Wendy's adds salads every once in a while. I remember they made the Asiago
feels like I'm talking
salad,
to Chris.
and I was like, why
Let's have a
would
food
you do
analogy
this?
in right now.
Don't you know that I'm the only person that goes to Wendy's? I'm never going to eat this. Why would you make this
Wendy's,
salad
man.
if I don't want it? Well, it's because I go there with my dad, and then he gets it instead. A successful MMO is an MMO that knows exactly what it is, and it caters to a handful of groups of people without trying to make the entire
Everyone,
game
not
for
going
everybody.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
I think that's what Graph did.
Why even bother with anything but the MSQ? The point I'm trying to make is that on top of catering to the cat moms, the leveling roulette mains, and RP enjoyers, the game used to cater to everyone.
Yeah, I know,
it used
Ultimate.
to cater to the high-end raid enjoyers who wanted in-depth class design to master and theorize how to maximize on a
ARR,
fight-by-fight
dude. What a
basis.
freaking
It
good
used
time.
to cater to the
I know
mid-core,
people talk bad about
semi-invested
it.
players who wanted a goal
don't
to
get it.
chase with relic weapons. It used to cater to people who actually wanted a game to get invested in and master. On top of the new players, the casuals, and Twitter spamming Graha Tia Sims. But it's not that way anymore, and I just don't know who the target audience is for this game. I don't know if Square Enix just wants you to simply play the patch by coming back once every 4 months to complete all the new content in 4 hours and go, oh, that was cool, I guess. And
Well,
then
that is kind of what they said to do, to be fair. But who is the game for? I feel like, I don't know, man. Am I crazy that whenever I see a UI bar that is 3 by, what is this?
It's like 10,
3 by
12?
12, that's 36 buttons on the screen. With like, how many buffs does he have up right now? What is this? This is like, he's got over 10 buffs up. And some of these buffs matter a lot. Like, for example, like this is a shield wall, or not a shield wall, this is a 20% damage reduction. And I think this is also, this is like his damage cooldown as well. And then the boss also has a debuff on it. This is this here. It reduces its damage done. So there are, yeah, Rampart. That's this one here. And I feel like this is extremely complex.
log out for 4 more months. It doesn't seem that way with how slow the gearing up process takes, or the hooks they have to
6
keep
years
you
ago?
resubbing
Okay.
with things like the auto demolition timer for housing, where you can't take a break longer than 45 days. But if they want us to continue playing week after week, paying our monthly $15 entry fee, then why are they removing all of the interest and challenge for players who do spend a large amount of time playing the game? I don't subscribe to
I think that, again, is one of the smallest communities, though, right? In terms of just percentage of the overall. I could be wrong, but I mean, I don't think I am.
the idea that making every
Well, I don't think that. I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like they didn't. I mean, yeah, they added like 2 ultimate fights, right? They added the Dragon Song reprise or whatever, and then they added the Omega Protocol. Like, they added 2 ultimate fights. I mean, like, it would be probably nice if they added some mid-core, like, I don't know, something like they said, like Bajja was kind of like that. I never played it. I'm not sure.
Bajja was
But, like,
great.
yeah, it would be good if they had added that. I don't know why they didn't. But otherwise,
So we didn't have a crystal, sorry, deep dungeon in Shadowbringers. People wanted that, so they decided. So the team. So from a development perspective, as a developer, this tells me that the team that made like Bojja and Zadnor is the team they shifted over for the deep dungeon. It might not be 1-to-1, but ultimately, like from a resource allocation, I think that the reason why we didn't have both, because we did have a Eureka and a deep dungeon, before we did have some of these things. So it's that I think human resources. I think them saying they're going to spare no expense is a good sign, but that phrase, I was like, I don't think it pays off for a couple years. And so what we'll be really telling is, will 7.0 have both a deep dungeon and some kind of exploration zone, which I think, and I would love for them to lean more into the Eureka stuff, and that would be exciting for me as a player.
yeah. They should have a Bajja, though? Yeah, sure.
everything easier and simpler ends up keeping new players invested for longer. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think expanding the available content, keeping a high skill ceiling for players to master, and constantly creating unique encounters to genuinely challenge your gameplay ability gives players a reason to play the game more than the required 4 hours a patch. I used to think that all the simplification to class design would mean players would have an easier time getting better at the game so they could tackle harder content, but as I'm sure all of you know, even in FF's easiest state of all time, people in roulettes are still terrible at their classes. People in Party Finder groups are still
fix humanity, man.
I don't know why he's upset about this, bro. Haven't you seen the classic WoW fucking compilations? They've got 3 buttons and they hit the wrong one. And this game came out 20 years ago. They still can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Because they're stupid. That's why.
Magnets that do 1 DPS. And again, I'm not trying to shit on these people. My point is that if someone doesn't have an interest in taking that step into the world of playing well and learning to optimize, then they just won't.
Yeah,
No amount of simplification, homogenization, and dumbing down or deletion.
I find, and not this is going to be a solution for everybody, but data ends up being a huge aspect of that. My wife is this kind of player. She wants me to parse. And so that way she can see how she's doing and if she is improving. And that in and of itself, the fact that the game shies away from that, and I'm not advocating for a real-time DPS meter. I'm advocating for clearing the content, or at the end of the content, win or lose, it gives you your stats. I don't care about anybody else's stats. How am I doing? Pull over pull, run over run. Give me some information. Give me that info so that all of a sudden it might invite the player to ask the question, could I do better? Could I do that faster? And so you have to gamify the game, and there is a massive resistance for them doing that. And that's a frustration that I continue to carry.
Of systems is going to make Johnny Two Fingers become a good player.
I actually think this is a very good point that he's making. I think he's right about this. What he's saying here is that you can't just make the game easier and then expect people that aren't Mythic Raiders to start raiding Mythic.
Yeah.
Because it's a total mentality change. It's like a completely different idea. It's like, oh, well, maybe if we make the lettuce the same color as a steak, people that like eating steaks will eat salads. Probably not. It's just a completely different, everything about it is massively different. So yeah, and this is what WoW did, is WoW saw not enough people were doing raids, so they tried to make the raids easier. They were like, oh, well, there's LFR, there's like an easier version of it, etc. And like, there are just some people that aren't interested or compelled to do that kind of content. And if they want to, they'll do it.
Just makes the game less interesting and fun for those of us who want to spend a little more time on the game and get a little more invested. And this is the crux of everything I've said.
Like, I got a lot of criticism for actually supporting the WAD prune of abilities. Like, I'll say this again. Razer as a company has their, like, I think one of the biggest reasons why Razer is as big as it is now is because Mists of Pandaria was so fucking complicated. There was so much shit in that game that you had to buy a Razer Naga in order to play Arena. It was fucking insane. There was like, how many buttons and fucking different types of, like shift modifiers, control modifiers. It's nuts. How many of you guys bought an MMO mouse around Mists of Pandaria?
I didn't around that time, but I do have one if I can move.
Feel like, yeah, me. There's a lot of fucking people. There you go. That's too much. Too many buttons. Probably not according to Razer. Razer probably thought it was great. However, it's too many buttons for average player. And I've said before, I think Mists of Pandaria was actually bad for class design. Because everybody had everything, and there were 3 of them. It was massively bloated. There was too much of everything. And I think Legion was 1,000 times better for every single class. Legion played so much better than Mists of Pandaria. And it had less buttons. MOP was homogenization. Yes. Class design in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria, Blizzard's idea of class design in those 2 expansions were giving the classes that don't have a button from another class. That's all they did. They said the best class design, in my opinion. Classes are way more fun, especially in PvP. What I'm saying is, like, they were only fun for people that are sitting here reminiscing on a video game that came out 10 years ago. And what I mean by that is that they were only fun for people that were hyper invested in the game. Yeah, it was fun for super try-hard players, but not for an average person.
The path Final Fantasy XIV has been going down does not tangibly improve the game for new players, because eventually they too will become veterans and reach a point where there is no more challenge or interest in the game for them. This game that I gave 12,000 hours of...
No, there's never going to be a point. Like, all you have to do is present the option, and the people that want to will take it, and the people that don't want to will just simply not take it. They're never going to take it. You're not going to convince them to take it. They're not going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to just start raiding Mythic now. It's not going to happen.
My life too, and 6 years of enjoyment has taken away everything I once enjoyed about it.
Well,
I just want the game I once loved to...
See, that's one of the things that brings into a bigger conversation about MMO preservation, because there isn't a way to play ARR or Heaven's Word or Stormblood or Shadowbringers. Like, the game is Endwalker, right? You know, and so you don't have that ability. And same thing, the problems that we end up seeing within the Final Fantasy 11 world. I mean, it's like, that's the solution, is that players make private servers that have these different versions, so you can go relive that nostalgia trip. 14 does not offer that as a service, but we saw what happened with WoW. Eventually they made a classic version of WoW, a progression version of that, you know, that system. And, you know, who knows, maybe Final Fantasy will do that too. That might be interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you want to see something like that.
Be good again. It has been in the past, and I desperately hope it will be in the future. Thanks for watching.
I wonder how he would feel about this if he started playing the game
everyone.
Today, for example. Because I always wonder, whenever I hear comments like this, how much of your feelings about this are an outcome of the actual state of the game versus how much of them are an outcome of you playing the game for a long time and having a different opinion about it. But I do think that it's an issue. It's like an existential problem for a lot of MMOs, that they have a content delivery method that players kind of lose interest in. And I think MMOs thrive on kind of having that it factor, that now factor, that, you know, sense of excitement of not knowing what to expect, like what's going to happen. And as soon as they become formulaic, I think that a lot of people do lose interest in them. And it's a problem that I think Lost Ark, Final Fantasy, and WoW are all three running into. And I think people said in chat, Destiny 2 has this issue as well.
I think New World will also have the same issue if they lean more and more into the theme park, which is attractive and it does bring in more players. But I think in the long run, you want that sand park, you want that theme park and that sandbox, and you want to marry them so it ends up, in a way, not like trying to appease everybody, but you just kind of different kinds of players, right? Like, you got your sandbox, and then you have some asynchronous multiplayer, going and gathering copper and making, that's what I do. I like to go just relax at the end of the day and gather some copper, hang out with some friends, and then I sell that on the market, and then the raiders get to go refine that into whatever. And that's how I always kind of view it. It's obviously probably a pipe dream, but that's why I'm glad New World has that those aspects, and I'm hopeful see what we see with Throne and Liberty. I'm hopeful to see what we see with Blue Protocol next year. Like, I think 2024 is going to be pretty great, but Throne and Liberty Blue Protocol could, I think there is some sandbox elements that we see with Throne and Liberty. I think that also ties into PvP. And then bigger MMOs like PAX Day and who knows with Ashes of Creation when that, or will that. But I also just stepped into Star Citizen, which is a real treat. We're going to be playing some more of that. I still need to go finish 16. All this boils down to is I just don't have time. I wish I had more time to hang out with you guys and play games and make videos, but that is, going to be something that maybe will come with enough time, But for the time being, I thank you so much for spending time with me today on that. I think I'll let Asmon finish it off, and then we'll wrap up with final thoughts.
So it's very hard to know how to solve this. I think this is something that, like, the MMO that solves this problem will be the next big MMO. Because nobody knows what it is.
That's that goes right into, like, people don't, there's a feeling of what people want, but the technology or the development or the money or the finance, there's all these moving parts, hasn't been able to capitalize on that. So we're all kind of just sitting here waiting and hoping, and wishing and praying. And anyway.
Final Fantasy's classes are super formulaic and homogenized. Well, I don't know yet. I think that one of the only good points that he brought up here, actually not one of the only, I mean, it's his opinion, right? It's whatever. But I think one of the main points that he brought up that I think was very good is that He said that you're not going to just make a game easier and make things simpler and convince casual players to start being hardcore players. They are just simply two fundamentally different groups of people. It's like, it doesn't matter how long you put a dog in the water, it's never going to turn into a fish. It's just never going to happen. There's a video right there. I think it's pretty good. What do you guys think? Yeah, a couple million. Yeah, do it for a couple million years and then maybe it would work.
Well, guys, that is the conclusion of the series here. I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. Thanks so much for hanging out throughout this time, especially if you came in with the first video and you made it all the way to video number 4. Tip of the hat. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And if you guys have other React videos that you want me to react to, you can always sound off below or hit me up on Discord. That is essentially kind of the policy. And this won't, become, at least not my intention to become the norm. But it is a good way of having these discussions. And yeah, that's going to be it. Guys, so much for your time today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that link in the description for the Instagram. And if you want to see more videos from me, which I cover a lot of different games, guides, and more, click the subscribe button. It would be fantastic to have you. And then if you want to venture into the bold world of my dark comedy, that is always an option as well. Thank you guys for being here. Love you faces. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.